Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Sales. If you're looking for actionable insights and real-world tools to turbocharge your sales starting tomorrow, well, you're in the right place. Your host, Kay Miller, earned the affectionate nickname Muffler Mama when she sold more automotive mufflers than anyone else in the world. In this podcast, Kay will talk to another superstar woman in sales as they reveal uncopyable strategies you can use to rack up more leads, snag dream clients, and take your sales numbers through the roof. Stay tuned and get ready to make more sales and how about this? More money.
I am super excited to be here today with Monica Neilson. Monica is a realtor in the Outer East Bay of San Francisco and started her real estate career at the age of 57. And she's been in real estate now for 7 years, so not a super long time, but she's been consistently in the top 10 to 15% of agents nationally. Very impressive. So welcome, Monica, to the podcast.
Thank you, Kay. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Now, I have to give a little backstory of how we connected, because you have a brother named Kelly, which is interesting because we have a daughter named Kelly. And I think I mentioned when we were talking, at times it gets very confusing because my husband, Steve, and Kelly play golf on Fridays. And sometimes he'll say, oh, Kelly said this or Kelly said that. And I'm like, what? She said what? And he's like, oh no, Kelly McCann. And I try to get him to call him McCann, but doesn't stick.
Well, and it's funny, you can't even go by initials because their initials are the same.
That's right. That's right. Kelly M. KM. So since you have started your real estate career, you have sold $59 million in sales. What a feat. I want to ask you about how and why you got there and talk about some of the things that our listeners can really take from you. And I've got a great one to start with. But before I do, you also have quite an interesting background that I think our listeners will enjoy hearing about. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you were led to go into real estate?
Okay. Well, first of all, since you know a little bit of my family, I do come from a family that is full of very driven, goal-oriented people.
Very
And
true.
I'm the youngest of four, and we're very close in age. And one could say we are all overachievers. I say that with a little slight, but it's true.
It
I'm
is
very
true.
grateful that my parents taught us to be hard workers and goal-oriented, and also the love of the outdoors. My parents introduced us to the outdoors and being active at a very young age, which has continued. I consider myself a lifelong athlete, which I believe has also helped me in my business. Moving forward to how I got here. Well, a little bit more background. I was married at a young age, and I married someone who grew up in the roller skating industry. And at the age of 19 and 21, we took over his father's roller skate center in a small town in Oregon, and eventually bought that business and the land and 4 duplexes that were on that property. And the roller skating business was quite interesting. It started at 19 and 21 and was very busy, very good for us. Certainly taught entrepreneurial skills at a young age. Eventually, I had some other goals and wanted out of that small town and went to college in my early 30s, graduating with a degree in sociology. I had always had an interest in property and real estate and heavily debated it when I was 34, 35, recently out of my marriage and out of college and wanting to start this business. But I knew then that real estate could take a little bit to earn some money. And so the timing wasn't right. To go back to your question about the interest, my ex-husband and I had owned rentals, and I was very interested in that piece of it. Just always intrigued by property investing. Being a landlord was not always great, but it intrigued me. Moving forward, I should backtrack and say in the years in the roller skating business and starting to feel that I wanted out of it because it was just taking over our lives. The roller skating rate phone rang in our house. And that was always a challenge for me. But it was great. My children grew up in the business. They competed. My oldest child went to Europe and skated. I mean, we have just all kinds of wonderful experiences from it. However, during those years, I always thought that it would be great to just work for somebody else. I'd like to go to work and come home, not have to answer that phone, just leave work behind me. Well, my first corporate gig out of college in my mid-30s, I soon found, of course, that not to be the case. As somebody that is very goal-oriented and a bit of an overachiever, I did not leave work at work. And fast forward to a couple different jobs in corporate America, I eventually had an opportunity as I was working for a division of U.S. Realtor. And I was inside sales at that time. But this reminds me of you and your mufflers because I was dealing with process filtration, like in drug manufacturing or chip manufacturing on the electronic side, not Brita filters like go into your water container. Well, eventually that led into an outside sales position in the very exciting world of clean room monitoring equipment. I was working for a company. My first outside sales gig, truly, was for a company with the initials at PMF.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. At the age of 48, I think. Ooh. And yeah. And we always had this running joke because I was one of two outside sales people in the whole country. And the guys, we'd laugh about, when you call someone and leave a message, it's Monica Neilson with PMS. No, you can't say that. And the guys would say, well, Monica, how do you think it is for me? I'm John Smith with PMS. What? Anyway, but it was a very technical sale. No matter how hard I tried, I just could not wrap my mind around that technical piece. I was really good at getting us in the door because I can build relationships well. And I was dealing with companies like Amgen, Genentech, big powerhouses in the drug manufacturing world. And I was good at getting us in the door and getting to the people. And then I'd bring the tech guys behind me to really close the deal because I didn't have the technical knowledge. I'm very scientific sales. And actually, Kay, I was fired from that job. First job I'd ever been fired from in my life. And only one.
Well, I appreciate your honesty on that because I'm sure there are people listening who've been fired and very traumatized by that and wondering what their future will hold. So you are obviously very resilient.
Well, it was a gift. Even my kids had been telling me that I needed to quit that job. And I knew the day that my boss from Boulder flew out and was meeting me in a coffee shop in the Bay Area that, this was happening. Just so happened I went from losing that job to driving to be actually there when one of my grandkids, my second grandson, was born. So it was quite an emotional swing day from, wow, I can't believe this happened, to, yes, in many ways I can, and I'm happy it happened, to this incredibly joyful moment of being a part of my oldest child's firstborn.
Right. A new chapter that you got to take advantage of. And it's interesting that you said you didn't really like that job. So It was really a blessing. And I think that's another important issue. It just wasn't a fit for you. And maybe you might not have pulled the trigger yourself, but it was done for you and for the best.
It totally was. And it was when that happened that I realized, okay, I have wanted to do real estate for about 20 years. If I don't do it now, I never will. And I sat down and talked to my husband about it. And we were in a position, of course, unlike when I was 34, 35 and recently divorced, I was fortunate that it would be okay if I didn't earn any money for a little while. I had the ability to, still eat and pay our bills without me bringing in income. So I set a goal to do it. And I promised my husband that by the end of that year, I would get my license. Well, I had a pretty fun year. I was getting unemployment, and because I had made decent money, my unemployment was good. I went on a trip to Hawaii for 2 weeks with kids, and, I was just having a good time. And I would study and then stop. And finally, fourth quarter came, and my husband's like, "So, Monica, are you going to do that?" Well, I booked the very last appointment of the year to take my test. It was on December 28th in 2016, because it'll be 7 years this year. And I took my test, and I knew I passed. I knew, that I was good. They don't tell you what you miss. They just tell you pass or fail. And I was so confident that day. I just knew it. So that was the beginning. Then being 55, 56, whatever I was, 56, I guess, I interviewed with like 7 brokerages before I decided where I wanted to go. And it was interesting because brokers would be, "Monica, never really had someone," 2 of them I went back to twice. "Never really had someone sit down and talk with us twice." I knew enough at the age I was at and the experiences I've had that culture was extremely important. And I wanted to be sure that I went to a place where I felt that fit. And here I am almost 7 years later, and I'm still with the same group. And I've had plenty of opportunity to lead. I get calls all the time, but I am surrounded by people that inspire me, support me, and what more could you want, right?
Right.
So
The team that you're part of is so important, and the support that you get. And you mentioned that you have a business coach and how huge that's been in helping your success.
Yeah, Kay, it's kind of a funny story. So my first year in real estate, I did, pardon me, I want to say all the wrong things. I basically went to like every lunch and learn, every meeting, everything I could do. And I was just overwhelmed with, well, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should do that. And I did, I think, 2 deals my first year. What's the average agent in America, I think, closes 3 to 4 deals a year. It's surprising. Most people don't know that. But
that does seem very low.
It is very low. And at the end of that first year, I had all this knowledge, and being the competitive athlete that I've always been and goal-oriented person, I was ready to really take some action. Several people within my brokerage were involved in coaching, and I explored it, and I took this giant leap, and I signed up for coaching. And I have to tell you, I was freaked out. I signed that contract on a Friday afternoon, and I was committing to almost $600 a month. And I was not making really any money. I had no idea how I was going to pay for this. That weekend, I called 2 of my closest friends, both athletes, several times about, "Oh my God, I can't believe what I did." I was just freaked out. And my whole thought process on coaching was, as somebody who's been athletic her whole life, I've had coaches and always responded to it well. Why wouldn't this work?
Today's podcast is sponsored by the acclaimed book, Uncopyable Sales Secrets: How to Create an Unfair Advantage and Outsell Your Competition by Kay Miller. If you want to make more sales, you need to read this book. We'll even get you started with a free download of the first 2 chapters. Go to uncopyablesales.com/chapters to grab this offer right now.
It also applies to your athletic background. And I do want to throw in the part that you are a runner. In fact, when Kelly told me about you, that's one of the first things he mentioned, that you are a devoted runner and you even have run marathons.
Well, we got into running just kind of by default because my U.S. filter job and my particle measuring system job, I was traveling quite a bit. And I've always been a bit of a cardio junkie, and you can run anywhere. I couldn't haul a bike. I couldn't, do these other things. So I got into running more.
However, I have to point out that you can walk. That's what I've always done. But being the person that you are, and like you said, I mean, I am too. I love the endorphins that you get from being active. I have a Peloton.
Me too.
Do you? Yes.
Yeah,
I tap my dots. But, I have heard a lot of successful people really are exercisers, and once you get into it, I've realized, I guess I should just say me. I have realized I can't be my best when I'm just really sedentary, and that obviously applies to you too. So just a shout out for listeners. It really makes a difference in your attitude.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I'm a firm believer that, like you said, walking, if I'm having a day that's really stressful or like during the pandemic time, just getting out and getting some fresh air, even if it's only 10 minutes, can totally change your world. And I've been fortunate that I've been active my whole life, so I didn't have to learn to love it. It's just, I'm one of those people that some people think I'm freakish that way, but it's hard for me to miss a day of exercise if that's just a walk, whatever. But yeah, I did. I ran my first marathon when I was 55. I swore I would never, ever, ever, ever do it. But a bunch of my triathlete Ironman friends told me I needed to. Well, of course, like I do anything, I took it seriously and I was very well prepared. And I went with a group of 10 people that year. Everybody's goal was to go to Boston. I was like, whatever. And I did quite well. I actually beat my age group qualifying time for Boston by like a half hour. And I went on to run Boston and then the New York Marathon. Only 3 marathons ever. I have no desire to do it again. But they were some pretty big events and
accomplishments.
Yes. And I have to tell you, the day of Boston, I had a really rough day. Really rough. I sat on the curb for about 10 minutes at one point. It was hot and it was rough. But when I made that turn on Boylston Street, that famous turn and coming to the finish line, almost brings tears to my eyes talking about it, because it was huge, really huge. So I think there's great value in making those goals that you're not sure how you're going to do it, but having that out.
And one thing I think your accomplishments outside of your work really bleed into your confidence in everything. And I also like the fact that you say this wasn't easy. And the successful people I know, it's not easy. We all have imposter syndrome and we have to push through things that we're afraid of or uncomfortable. And the fact that you do that in athletics really makes sense as far as your drive in general and in business and how you've been so successful. So I really think that is a critical piece of that you pushed yourself, even though it was really hard.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in starting a business or being an entrepreneur or probably any growth is facing those fears. One of the things that I did when I first started that really started to build my business is I went door knocking, and I was scared to death. And I had people slam the door in my face. I had, just some very challenging moments. But I will tell you that very first time that I went, I met someone that was a young mom of 4 kids. She was very kind, met me at the door, chatted for a long time. I stayed in touch with her for 2 years. Sent them things in the mail. I never could find her phone number. She's not a social media person, but I did everything I could to stay in touch with them. Well, 2 years later, about a day after I had sent them my newsletter, got a phone call. I have since done 7 transactions with that family since that day. And, it just goes to show you never know where it's going to come from. And just like picking up the phone and making that call that you don't want to make. What's the worst thing that's going to happen?
And that's
They'll
a very
hang up.
helpful. Yeah, that's a very helpful line. I have heard this from others, and I have used this a lot myself. What's the worst thing that can happen? They'll say no. And you have to find your own way to overcome fear. But of course, your comfort zone. If you expand your comfort zone once, it will never be as hard again. So once you get the door slammed in your face once, the next time you're like, okay, I didn't die. And like you said, every connection that you make and being kind to people, just being ethical and true to your values, you never know where those people will come back to your life. And 7 transactions, that's huge. She must move a lot.
Well, it's family.
Okay, so referrals too.
Yeah. And I just closed the other day on a transaction that was my 6th for a particular family this year. Those 7 have been over a few years, but this year I had 6 with one family. And as a realtor, that trust is what you hope for. And it's quite flattering to know that, I'm connected. I'm part of their family. I've gone to a funeral. I've gone to birthday parties. I mean, that's what we all hope for, is that we become so much a part of these people's lives that anytime anybody thinks about buying or selling, oh, you got to call Monica. She's great. That's the goal.
The highest compliment.
Exactly.
So I want to touch on something that I noticed through our emails, and we did have a conversation, a lovely conversation. You're obviously very easy to talk to, very personable. And you emailed me afterwards and you said, yeah, I have an appointment after this and I'm going to nail it. And that tickled me. And really, that's something I'm working on, positive self-talk, because I definitely go to the negative, like a lot of us have that tendency. I've been listening to podcasts and, of course, interviewing women and really hearing that people make a concerted effort to talk positively to ourselves. And, I think you were the one that said what we say to ourselves matters. It really does. Yeah. We're listening to ourselves. So, I think that positive talk has helped you be successful. I know you obviously give great service. You really care about your customers. I mean, what bigger purchase do we make? What more important purchase do we make than our homes? I mean, that is really a big deal. So yes, flattered, and just must be a huge satisfaction to have that. So of course, the whole point of this podcast is to help our listeners to learn how to make more sales. And we've dropped a couple of gems. So when you're listening, as you listen, you should be taking notes on this. I would love to hear, what specific actions you take that help you get repeat business and referrals.
Okay. First, on the positive self-talk, yes. We have to be our own best cheerleader, because if we are, who's going to be, right?
Right.
And nobody's going to do this for us. We have to do it ourselves. And I truly believe that what we tell ourselves matters. And in the sense of tips that I can give on what has led to my success, consistency is key in any business, of course, but in this business particularly, It's consistency is so important. It's an easy industry for people to, have a couple closings, make some decent money. They're not going to do anything for 6 months. Well, 6 months, you're starting all over. And a big component of my success has been that I've been very consistent with the touches that I do to people. I am what's considered, I won't go into this too deep, but in real estate, I'm a geo farmer.
Now, what you have to explain that to us.
Well, that means I have a geographical territory, my farm. So I'm a geo farmer, as we say in our industry. My farm is a particular area in my town that I have chosen to build a community around. I have about 412 homes in my farm that I have been working for, next July will be 7 years. And I first started with flags in the yard at 4th of July. And I thought it was the stupidest thing. My mastermind group said, Monica has been great. Well, you know what? It takes 2 days. And on the second day I was out there doing it, I was blown away by people that thought, are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Do we owe you money for it? And, it just started there. And I deliver a monthly newsletter by foot to all 412 homes. I do have a couple of kids in the neighborhood I've hired over time because sometimes I can't make it. I have gone on now to where I do not only the candy cane, or I've done candy canes in December, and people want, like candy canes like thigh high. So like when you drive down all the yards, not candy canes on the, little candy canes to suck on. I've done something at spring. We don't really say Easter anymore. I have built on this, and I've done events like ice cream socials. My geo farm is centered around a park and a school. So I've held ice cream socials the last couple of summers. I've also done garage sales, and that has been a big piece of my success because I do the majority of business in that area. And I've had people call me up and say they want to hire me because they've seen how hard I work. And if anybody is going to work hard for us selling our home, it's going to be you. And that's the cool.
Yes, you do. You obviously have a huge, very strong work ethic. And that's really brilliant. I mean, you're visible to people, not only top of mind, but really showing the difference that you make. We talked a little bit before we started recording. I said, it's probably really nice to have freedom being a realtor. And you said, I don't really have that freedom because, you're the type of person that is always available and is willing to get out there and work hard for your customers.
Yes, but I've also learned I need to take care of me as well. And I'm much better about doing things like putting my phone on Do Not Disturb when I'm in a meeting, or, obviously when I'm in the middle, when I have an escrow going or there's certain crucial times, I need to be available as readily as I can to my client. Communication is typically the biggest complaint people have with a realtor. And so, because we don't know what we don't know. And like you said, our homes are typically our largest asset. And it's a very emotional sale for most people.
Exactly. Yes.
And the more you can keep them informed, obviously the less stress they're going to feel because they're aware of what's happening. But another piece of that, Kay, and I think that helps, is that not to be afraid to hire out what you're not good at. What maybe isn't your best thing or what you need help with. I did hire out, I have, 3 assistants now, 2 new gals that work for me in transaction. And then I have a full-time assistant. And I hired her about 4.5 years ago now. And that was another thing, like coaching. I was My coach had been talking to me about, Monica, you need to hire someone. Why? I can't afford to hire someone. How am I going to do this? Yeah, you need to hire someone. Well, I took that leap of faith, scared to death. And it's been the best thing I've ever done.
And that is, I think that was such a good decision, a scary decision. Something I've also heard from other successful women is that you can't wait till you're successful and then hire a coach. You start with hiring a coach, and that's what makes you successful. But it's scary. Again, it's scary, but knowing you had the drive, you were going to make this work. You probably, like you said, had a little pressure from your husband, but also the high expectations of yourself. So I think that's good. And again, for you listening, remember, you don't need to wait until you make it to hire a coach or to hire an assistant to hire help. You also mentioned that you are not afraid to ask people if you aren't sure what to do or you need their knowledge.
Well, how else do we learn, right? Is that we need to tap into those that, or go to the resources where we can get that knowledge and not afraid to admit that you're a beginner and you don't know, which was hard for me at the stage of life I was at and having had the successes I've had in my life. It was hard to admit that I'm starting out here and I don't really know what the hell I'm supposed to do first.
And like you said, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do something that I have not yet done on the podcast, but I'm going to do it with your permission. I would like we have missed some major topics that I wanted to cover. And even though what we've talked about has been brilliant, I would like to make this part 1. And I would like to, I want to keep my podcast to about 30 minutes. I know you listen to a lot of podcasts when you're running, and I think we all appreciate not having super long podcasts. So are you okay with that?
You mean you want me to come back?
I want you to come back. Yes. And do part 2.
Love it.
So with your permission.
Our time has gone by.
It's flown by. And, I can see just by our conversation so far, plus our conversations leading up to this, why you are so successful. But there's a lot more. So I want to say thank you so much, Monica, for what you've shared today. I think it will be invaluable to our listeners. I am going to put your contact information in the show notes, because if you are in the East Bay of San Francisco area and you want to either buy or sell, you need to get a hold of Monica. So check the show notes for her information and, go get them. So Monica, thank you so much for your time. I've really appreciated it. As I said, I wish you all the best in your future. And I know you're going to continue to not only be a huge success, but really enjoy what you're doing, which is helping people.
Well, thank you, Kay. It's been a pleasure to be here. And I do thoroughly enjoy providing service to people and having that be a positive outcome. That's what it's all about. So thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Sales, your source for secrets you can use to make more sales. Check the show notes for links and contact information. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please spread the word by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. You can always learn more by going to uncopyablesales.com/podcast. Until next time, go out and supercharge your sales like a true uncopyable rock star.